Maria Santos had been working at Romano's Italian restaurant for 3 years. Every morning she would arrive at 7 sharp, tie her black apron around her waist, and prepare for another long day of serving customers. The restaurant sat on the corner of 5th Street, with big windows that let in the morning sunlight and red checkered tablecloths that gave it a warm family feel. Maria was 24 years old and had come to the city from a small village to support her sick mother and younger brother. She sent most of her earnings home each month, keeping only enough for her tiny apartment rent and basic food. The job at Romano's was everything to her, even though the owner, Mr. Vincent Romano, was known for his bad temper. Vincent Romano was a man in his 50s, with a round belly and thinning gray hair. He had inherited the restaurant from his father, but lacked the kindness and business sense that had made the place successful. Over the years, Vincent had become increasingly bitter and harsh with his employees. He would shout at the kitchen staff for small mistakes and often reduce their pay for broken dishes or spilled drinks. The other waitresses at Romano's had warned Maria about Vincent's mood swings. "Just keep your head down and do your work," advised Anna, an older waitress who had been there for 10 years. "Don't give him any reason to notice you." But Maria was naturally friendly and hard-working, qualities that sometimes put her in Vincent's line of sight. On this particular Tuesday morning, the restaurant was busier than usual. A large group of business people had made a reservation for lunch, and several regular customers had also arrived. Maria moved quickly between tables, taking orders, serving food, and refilling coffee cups. She smiled at every customer and made sure they had everything they needed. At table 7 sat a man Maria had never seen before. He was well-dressed in a dark suit, with silver hair combed back neatly. His eyes were sharp and observant, and he spoke quietly on his phone while eating his pasta. Something about him seemed different from their usual customers, but Maria couldn't put her finger on what it was. She served him politely and noticed he left a generous tip. The trouble started during the lunch rush. Maria was carrying a tray with 4 plates of hot food when a small child at table 3 suddenly ran into the aisle. Trying to avoid the child, Maria stumbled slightly, and one of the plates slipped from her tray. It crashed to the floor with a loud noise, sending pasta and sauce splashing across the tiles. The restaurant went quiet for a moment. The customers looked over, and Maria felt her face turn red with embarrassment. She immediately bent down to clean up the mess, apologizing to the customers at the nearby tables. The other waitresses rushed to help her, and within minutes, they had cleaned everything up and brought a fresh plate for the customer who had lost their meal. Vincent Romano emerged from his office when he heard the commotion. His face was already red with anger before he even saw what had happened. When he spotted Maria cleaning the last bits of sauce from the floor, his expression grew even darker. "Maria, what did you do now?" he shouted across the restaurant, making several customers turn to stare. His voice was loud and harsh, cutting through the normal chatter and clinking of dishes. Maria stood up slowly, holding the dirty towels in her hands. "I'm sorry, Mr. Romano. A child ran into the aisle, and I tried not to hit them. I've already cleaned everything up and got the customer a new meal." But Vincent wasn't interested in explanations. He had been having a bad week. The restaurant's profits were down, he had argued with his wife that morning, and his stress was looking for an outlet. In his mind, clumsy employees were the source of all his problems. "This is the 3rd time this month something like this has happened," he yelled, even though it wasn't true. "You're costing me money with your carelessness." The customers were now openly staring at the scene. Some looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and whispering to each other. The man in the dark suit at table 7 had put down his phone and was watching intently, his expression unreadable. Maria kept her voice low and respectful. "Mr. Romano, please. I'll pay for the broken plate. It was an accident, and I made sure the customer was happy." "Pay for the plate?" Vincent's voice rose even higher. "You think this is just about one plate? This is about your attitude. You're sloppy and careless, and I'm tired of dealing with it." Anna, the senior waitress, tried to step in. "Vincent, please. Maria is one of our best workers. Everyone makes mistakes sometimes." "Stay out of this, Anna," Vincent snapped at her. "And you, Maria, I want you to understand something." What happened next shocked everyone in the restaurant. Vincent Romano, red-faced and furious, walked quickly across the dining room toward Maria. She stood there, still holding the cleaning towels, unsure of what he planned to do. When he reached her, he put his hands on her shoulders and pushed her backward with significant force. Maria, caught completely off guard, stumbled backward and fell hard onto the floor. Her head hit the ground with a dull thud, and she cried out in pain and surprise. The cleaning towels scattered around her, and she lay there for a moment, dazed and hurt. The restaurant fell into complete silence. Customers stared in shock and horror at what they had just witnessed. Several people pulled out their phones, some to record and others to call for help. A few customers stood up from their tables, clearly disturbed by what they had seen. "That's what happens when you don't listen," Vincent shouted down at Maria, who was struggling to sit up on the floor. "Maybe now you'll be more careful." Anna and two other waitresses rushed to Maria's side, helping her to sit up and checking if she was seriously hurt. Maria's eyes were filled with tears, partly from pain and partly from the humiliation of being treated this way in front of all the customers. "Are you okay, honey?" Anna asked gently, helping Maria to her feet. "Can you stand?" Maria nodded weakly, though her head was throbbing and her back ached from the fall. She was more shocked than anything else. In 3 years of working at Romano's, Vincent had never laid a hand on her before. He had yelled and been cruel with words, but physical violence was something new and terrifying. The man at table 7 slowly stood up from his chair. He was tall and imposing, and as he rose, something about his presence seemed to fill the room. He walked calmly toward where Maria was being helped to her feet, his footsteps echoing in the silent restaurant. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm, but carrying an authority that made everyone turn to look at him. "I think there's been a serious problem here." Vincent, still angry and not thinking clearly, turned toward the well-dressed stranger. "This is none of your business. This is between me and my employee." The man studied Vincent for a long moment, his sharp eyes taking in everything. "Actually, I think it became everyone's business the moment you decided to assault a young woman in front of a room full of witnesses." Vincent's face grew even redder. "Assault? Don't be dramatic. I just gave her a little push to teach her a lesson. She needed to learn respect." "A little push?" The man's voice remained calm, but something in his tone made several people in the restaurant feel a chill. "I saw you shove a defenseless woman to the ground for dropping a plate. Where I come from, we have names for men who hurt women." Maria was now standing, though Anna kept a supportive arm around her shoulders. She looked between Vincent and the stranger, sensing that something important was happening but not understanding what. Vincent, feeling challenged in front of his customers and employees, puffed up his chest. "Listen, buddy, I don't know who you think you are, but this is my restaurant. I run things here the way I see fit." The well-dressed man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to Vincent without saying a word. Vincent looked down at the card, and his face suddenly went pale. His hands began to tremble slightly, and he looked back up at the man with a completely different expression. "Mr. Santangelo," Vincent whispered, his voice suddenly very small. I didn't know." "No," the man replied quietly. "You didn't know, but now you do." Around the restaurant, customers were beginning to understand that something significant had just happened. The name Santangelo was whispered among a few people who recognized it. In this part of the city, certain names carried weight and demanded respect. Marco Santangelo was not just any businessman. He was known in certain circles as a man who commanded respect and whose word carried significant influence in the neighborhood. His family had deep roots in the community, and their businesses touched many aspects of local life. They were the kind of people you wanted as friends and definitely didn't want as enemies. Vincent Romeo's restaurant suddenly felt very small and very quiet. The confident, bullying owner had shrunk into himself, realizing he had made a terrible mistake. He had just physically assaulted an employee in front of one of the most powerful men in the area. Maria, still not understanding who this stranger was or why Vincent had become so frightened, simply stood there feeling confused and hurt. Her head still ached, and she wanted nothing more than to go home and forget this horrible day. But Marco Santangelo wasn't finished. He turned to Maria with a gentle expression that was completely different from the stern look he had given Vincent. "Miss," he said kindly, "are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" Maria shook her head slightly, then winced at the movement. "I think I'm okay. Just shaken up." "I think you should have a doctor look at your head," Marco suggested. "Head injuries can be more serious than they first appear." He turned back to Vincent, who was still staring at the business card in his trembling hands. "Mr. Romano, I think we need to have a conversation about how you treat your employees. But first, you're going to arrange for this young lady to see a doctor, and you're going to pay for it." Vincent nodded quickly, eager to do anything that might help his situation. "Yes, of course. Whatever she needs." Maria looked around at all the staring faces, feeling overwhelmed by the attention and the strange turn the situation had taken. She didn't understand why this stranger was helping her or why Vincent had become so cooperative so quickly. The other customers in the restaurant were watching the scene with fascination and concern. Some were clearly upset by what they had witnessed, while others seemed intrigued by the drama unfolding before them. Anna still had her arm around Maria, offering quiet comfort. The other waitresses stood nearby, looking worried for their colleague, but also nervous about what might happen next. They had all worked under Vincent's harsh management for years, and seeing him look so frightened was something none of them had ever experienced before. Marco Santangelo's presence had changed everything in the restaurant. What had started as a simple case of workplace bullying had suddenly become something much more serious and complex. Marco Santangelo watched as Vincent Romano fumbled with his phone, trying to call a doctor for Maria. The restaurant owner's hands were shaking so badly he could barely dial the numbers. The transformation from angry bully to frightened man had happened in seconds, and everyone in the restaurant could feel the change in atmosphere. "Anna," Vincent called to the senior waitress, his voice much quieter now. "Please take Maria to Dr. Phillips on Elm Street. Tell him to send the bill directly to the restaurant." Anna nodded and gently guided Maria toward the door. As they walked past Marco, he stopped them with a gentle touch on Anna's arm. "Miss," he said to Maria, "I want you to know that what happened here today was wrong. No one has the right to put their hands on you, especially not your boss." He reached into his wallet and pulled out several $100s. "This is for any expenses you might have, and to make sure you don't worry about money while you recover." Maria stared at the money, confused and overwhelmed. "I can't take this, sir. I don't even know who you are." "My name is Marco Santangelo," he said simply, "and you can take it because it's the right thing to do. Sometimes when wrong things happen, people with the ability to help should step in." Anna recognized the name and her eyes widened slightly. She had lived in the neighborhood long enough to know the Santangelo family's reputation. They were powerful people who commanded respect, but they were also known for protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. After Maria and Anna left for the doctor, Marco turned his attention back to Vincent, who was trying to return to normal operations but failing miserably. The other customers were finishing their meals quickly and leaving, clearly uncomfortable with the tension still hanging in the air. "Mr. Romano," Marco said, approaching the trembling restaurant owner, "I think you and I need to have a private conversation." Vincent nodded quickly and led Marco to his small office behind the kitchen. The office was cramped and messy, with papers scattered across an old wooden desk and a filing cabinet that looked like it hadn't been organized in years. Vincent closed the door and turned to face Marco, his face pale and sweating. "Mr. Santangelo, please let me explain," Vincent began. Marco raised his hand to stop him. "No explanations needed. I saw everything with my own eyes. You assaulted a young woman who was doing her job. You humiliated her in front of customers. You showed her no respect and no kindness." Vincent swallowed hard. "I was having a bad day. The business has been struggling and I just lost my temper. It won't happen again." "You're right," Marco said calmly. "It won't happen again. But not because you say so. It won't happen again because you're going to make some changes around here." Marco sat down in the chair across from Vincent's desk, making himself comfortable. This was clearly going to be a longer conversation than Vincent had hoped. "Tell me about Maria," Marco said. "How long has she worked here?" 3 years, Vincent replied, still standing nervously. She's actually one of our better waitresses. The customers like her." "And how do you usually treat your employees?" Vincent shifted uncomfortably. He knew his management style was harsh, but he had always justified it as necessary to run a tight operation. "I expect them to work hard and do their jobs properly." Marco's expression didn't change. "That's not what I asked. I asked how you treat them." The silence stretched out for several moments. Vincent couldn't bring himself to admit that he regularly yelled at his staff, docked their pay for minor mistakes, and created an atmosphere of fear in his restaurant. "I run a business," Vincent finally said. "Sometimes you have to be firm." "Firm?" Marco's voice carried a hint of danger now. "Is that what you call pushing a young woman to the ground? Being firm?" Vincent realized he was digging himself deeper into trouble with every word. "No, sir, that was wrong. I admitted that." Marco leaned forward in his chair. "Vincent, let me tell you a story. My grandfather came to this country with nothing. He worked in restaurants, washing dishes and cleaning floors. He was treated badly by some bosses who thought immigrants deserved no respect. But he never forgot those experiences." Vincent listened nervously, not sure where this story was leading. "When my grandfather finally opened his own business, he made a promise. He would never treat his employees the way he had been treated. He would pay them fairly, speak to them with respect, and help them when they needed help. That's how you build loyalty. That's how you build a business that lasts." Marco stood up and walked around the small office, looking at the pictures on the walls and the scattered papers on the desk. "Your father, he understood this too, didn't he? This restaurant used to have a good reputation in the neighborhood." Vincent's face flushed with shame. His father had indeed been well-liked and respected in the community. People had enjoyed coming to Romano's not just for the food, but for the warm atmosphere and friendly service. "My father was different," Vincent admitted quietly. "He was better with people." "No," Marco corrected him. "Your father understood that people deserve dignity. That's not a special talent. That's basic human decency." Marco returned to his chair and fixed Vincent with a steady stare. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to change how you run this restaurant starting today." Vincent nodded quickly, though he wasn't sure what changes Marco had in mind. "First, Maria gets a raise, a substantial one, and she gets 2 weeks paid time off to recover from what you did to her today." "Yes, sir," Vincent agreed immediately. "Second, you're going to apologize to her. Not just a quick sorry, but a real apology where you admit what you did was wrong and promise it will never happen again." Vincent nodded again, though the thought of apologizing made him uncomfortable. He wasn't used to admitting mistakes. "Third, you're going to change how you treat all your employees. No more yelling, no more threats, no more docking pay for accidents. You treat them with respect, or you'll answer to me." The weight of Marco's words hung heavy in the small office. Vincent understood that this wasn't just advice. It was a command from someone with the power to make his life very difficult if he didn't comply. "I understand, Mr. Santangelo. It will be different from now on." Marco studied Vincent's face, trying to determine if the man truly understood the seriousness of the situation. "Vincent, I'm going to be watching. I have friends in this neighborhood who eat here regularly. If I hear that you've gone back to your old ways, we'll have another conversation, and trust me, you don't want that second conversation." Vincent felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard stories about what happened to people who crossed the Santangelo family, and none of those stories ended well. "There won't be any problems, sir, I promise." Marco reached into his jacket and pulled out another business card. "This is my card. If Maria or any of your other employees have problems with you in the future, they can call me directly." Vincent took the card with trembling fingers. The idea that his employees might have a direct line to someone like Marco Santangelo terrified him more than anything else that had happened that day. "One more thing," Marco said as he stood to leave. "I want you to think about why you really became so angry today. Was it really about a dropped plate? Or was it about other things in your life that you're taking out on people who can't fight back?" Vincent had no answer for that question, but it hit closer to home than he wanted to admit. His marriage was struggling, the restaurant's finances were tight, and he felt like he was failing at everything. Taking out his frustrations on his employees had become a way to feel powerful when everything else in his life felt out of control. "I'll think about it, sir." Marco headed toward the door, then turned back one more time. "Vincent, you have a choice to make. You can continue being the kind of man who pushes around people weaker than himself, or you can become the kind of man your father would be proud of. Choose wisely." After Marco left the office, Vincent slumped into his desk chair and put his head in his hands. The restaurant outside was nearly empty now, with only a few customers finishing their meals. The staff was cleaning up the lunch service and preparing for the evening shift. Word of what had happened was already spreading through the kitchen and among the waitresses. Everyone was talking in hushed tones about Vincent's public humiliation and Maria's fall. They were also talking about the mysterious man who had intervened and how quickly Vincent had changed his tune. Carlos, the head cook, knocked on the office door. "Vincent? Is everything okay out there? We heard shouting and then Maria left with Anna." Vincent looked up at Carlos, a man who had worked in the restaurant for 8 years and had endured countless verbal attacks from his boss. For the first time, Vincent saw Carlos not as just an employee, but as a human being who deserved better treatment. "Carlos, sit down for a minute," Vincent said, surprising the cook with his calm tone. Carlos sat down nervously, wondering if he was about to be fired for some unknown reason. "I owe you an apology," Vincent said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. "I've been a terrible boss. I've yelled at you, blamed you for things that weren't your fault, and made your job much harder than it needed to be." Carlos stared at his boss in complete shock. In 8 years, he had never heard Vincent apologize for anything. "I don't know if I can change overnight," Vincent continued, "but I'm going to try to be better. You and everyone else here deserve to be treated with respect." Carlos didn't know what to say. He had been thinking about quitting for months because of Vincent's treatment, but this sudden change left him confused and hopeful at the same time. "What about Maria?" Carlos asked. "Is she going to be okay?" "She's at the doctor now," Vincent replied, "and when she comes back, things are going to be different around here." Meanwhile, at Dr. Phillips's office, Maria was sitting on an examination table while the doctor checked her head and back. Anna sat in a chair nearby, still processing everything that had happened at the restaurant. "You have a mild concussion," Dr. Phillips told Maria. "Nothing serious, but you need to rest for a few days and avoid any strenuous activity. If you have any severe headaches, nausea, or dizziness, come back immediately." Maria nodded, though the movement made her wince slightly. "How much will this cost?" "I don't have insurance." "Don't worry about the cost," Anna said gently. "Mr. Romano is paying for everything, remember?" Maria still felt confused about the whole situation. "Anna, who was that man? The one who helped me?" Anna hesitated, unsure how much to explain. "His name is Marco Santangelo. His family... They're important people in this neighborhood. People respect them and listen to them. But why did he help me? He doesn't even know me." Anna smiled sadly. "Some people believe it's wrong to hurt innocent people. Mr. Santangelo is one of those people. He saw something wrong happening, and he stopped it." As they left the doctor's office, Maria was still trying to understand how her normal workday had turned into something so dramatic and life-changing. She had no idea that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. 2 weeks later, Maria returned to Romano's Italian restaurant, feeling nervous and uncertain. The doctor had cleared her to return to work, but she wasn't sure what kind of workplace she was coming back to. The memory of being pushed to the ground in front of all those customers still haunted her. And she had spent many sleepless nights wondering if she should look for another job. Anna had visited her twice during her time off, bringing updates about the restaurant and reassuring her that things were changing. According to Anna, Vincent had been like a different person since the incident with Marco Santangelo. He was quieter, more polite, and hadn't yelled at anyone in the entire 2 weeks. When Maria walked through the front door of Romano's, she immediately noticed differences. The restaurant looked cleaner and brighter. Fresh flowers sat on each table, and there was new artwork on the walls. The atmosphere felt lighter somehow, less tense than before. "Maria!" Anna called out cheerfully from behind the counter. "Welcome back! How are you feeling?" "Much better, thank you," Maria replied, though she still felt nervous about seeing Vincent again. As if summoned by her thoughts, Vincent emerged from the kitchen. Maria tensed, prepared for the worst, but what happened next surprised her completely. "Maria," Vincent said quietly, approaching her with his head slightly lowered. "Could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Maria nodded, following him to a corner table away from the other staff. Vincent sat across from her, and she could see that he looked different. The angry, red-faced man she remembered had been replaced by someone who looked tired, but more peaceful. "First," Vincent began, his voice careful and sincere, "I owe you a serious apology. What I did to you was completely wrong. There is no excuse for putting my hands on you or humiliating you in front of customers. I violated your trust and your safety, and I am deeply sorry." Maria stared at him in surprise. This was not the Vincent Romano she had worked for over the past 3 years. This man was actually looking her in the eyes and speaking to her with respect. "I've been doing some thinking over the past 2 weeks," Vincent continued, "about why I became so angry that day and about how I've been treating everyone who works here. The truth is, I was taking out my own problems on people who didn't deserve it. That's not the kind of man I want to be, and it's not the kind of boss this restaurant needs." Vincent reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you. It's 2 weeks' pay for your time off, plus a bonus, plus a permanent raise starting today. You're now making $3 more per hour." Maria opened the envelope and gasped. Inside was more money than she usually made in a month. "Mr. Romano, I can't accept this much." "Yes, you can," Vincent said firmly but kindly. "You earned it through 3 years of hard work and dedication, and you deserved it long before today." Maria felt tears forming in her eyes. The extra money would mean she could send more support to her mother and maybe even save a little for herself. "There's something else," Vincent said. "Mr. Santangelo asked me to give you this." He handed her another envelope, this one with her name written in elegant handwriting. Inside was a note that read, "Maria, I hope you're feeling better. If you ever need anything, Or if you ever have problems at work again, please don't hesitate to call me, Marco Santangelo. Below the note was his phone number. He's been checking on you, Vincent explained. He called twice to make sure you were getting proper medical care and to ask when you'd be returning to work. Maria was touched that a stranger would show such concern for her well-being. He seems like a very kind man. He is, Vincent agreed. And he's also someone who cares about how people are treated in this neighborhood. He made me realize that I had lost sight of what's important. Over the next few hours, Maria discovered just how much had changed at Romano's. Vincent spoke politely to everyone, saying please and thank you to the kitchen staff and treating the waitresses with respect. When a customer complained about their food, instead of yelling at the cook, Vincent calmly worked with the kitchen to prepare a replacement meal and personally apologized to the customer. During the lunch rush, a new waitress named Sophie accidentally dropped a tray of drinks. Maria watched nervously, remembering her own accident 2 weeks earlier. But instead of exploding with anger, Vincent simply walked over and helped Sophie clean up the mess. "Don't worry about it," he told Sophie gently. "Accidents happen. Let's just get this cleaned up and get new drinks for that table." Sophie looked amazed, clearly having heard stories about Vincent's previous temperament. The other staff members exchanged glances, still adjusting to their boss's transformation. At the end of her first day back, Maria was putting on her coat to leave when Vincent approached her again. "Maria, I want you to know that if you ever feel unsafe or uncomfortable here, you can talk to me. And if you don't feel comfortable talking to me, you have Mr. Santangelo's number. I never want you to feel trapped or afraid in your workplace." Maria nodded, touched by his words. "Thank you, Mr. Romano. Today felt different. Good different." Vincent smiled, and Maria realized she had never seen him truly smile before. "I'm trying to make this the kind of place people want to work, not the kind of place they're afraid to work." As Maria walked home that evening, she reflected on the strange turn her life had taken. 2 weeks ago, she had been humiliated and hurt, wondering if she would have to find a new job. Now she had a raise, a more respectful work environment, and the protection of someone powerful enough to ensure her safety. She decided to stop by the small grocery store near her apartment to buy ingredients for a special dinner. With her new wages, she could afford to buy the good pasta and fresh vegetables that reminded her of her mother's cooking. While she was shopping, she noticed a familiar figure in the next aisle. Marco Santangelo was selecting tomatoes, dressed more casually than when she had seen him at the restaurant, but still carrying himself with quiet dignity. Maria hesitated for a moment, then approached him. "Mr. Santangelo?" He turned and smiled warmly when he recognized her. "Maria, how are you feeling? I heard you returned to work today." "Much better, thank you. And yes, I went back to Romano's today. Everything is very different now." Marco nodded, pleased. Vincent is trying to become a better man. Change isn't always easy, but it's possible when someone truly wants to improve. "I wanted to thank you," Maria said earnestly, "for helping me that day, and for the money you gave me. You didn't have to do any of that." "Yes, I did," Marco replied simply. "When we see wrong things happening, especially to good people, we have a responsibility to act if we can. My grandfather taught me that." They talked for a few more minutes about Maria's family and her plans for the future. Marco was interested to learn that she was hoping to save money to bring her brother to the city so he could attend a better school. "Education is important," Marco agreed. "If you ever need help with that, you know how to reach me." As they parted ways, Maria felt a sense of gratitude that went beyond words. She had learned that sometimes, when bad things happen, good people appear to help set things right. Back at Romano's, Vincent was staying late to go over the restaurant's books. For the first time in months, he was looking at the numbers with optimism instead of stress. Word was spreading through the neighborhood that Romano's had improved its atmosphere and service. Several customers had commented on the positive changes, and reservations were increasing. More importantly, his employees seemed happier. They smiled more, worked with greater enthusiasm, and no longer walked around in fear of his outbursts. The kitchen ran more smoothly when people weren't constantly nervous about making mistakes. Vincent's phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was his wife, Elena. "How was your day?" she asked, and for the first time in months, the question didn't sound forced or worried. "Good," Vincent replied, and realized he meant it. "Really good. I think we're turning things around here." Elena had noticed the change in her husband over the past 2 weeks. He came home less angry, slept better, and had even suggested they plan a weekend trip together for the first time in years. "I'm proud of you," Elena said softly, "for making these changes. I know it hasn't been easy." Vincent looked around his restaurant, seeing it with new eyes. The old Vincent would have been angry about the cost of the flowers on the tables and the raises he had given his employees. The new Vincent saw investments in creating something better. 3 months later, Romano's Italian restaurant was busier than it had been in years. Food critics had started visiting again, drawn by reports of improved service and a more welcoming atmosphere. Vincent had hired 2 additional waitresses and a second cook to handle the increased business. Maria had become something of a legend among the restaurant staff. New employees were told the story of the day she was pushed down and how everything changed afterward. She had been promoted to head waitress and was training new staff members in customer service. Most surprisingly, Maria had started taking business classes in the evenings, encouraged by both Vincent and Marco Santangelo. Her dream was to eventually open a small restaurant of her own, serving the traditional foods of her hometown. Marco Santangelo continued to eat at Romano's once a week, always sitting at table 7. His presence served as a quiet reminder to Vincent of the promises he had made, but also as a symbol of the positive changes that were possible when people chose to do the right thing. The neighborhood had taken notice of Romano's transformation. Other business owners began treating their employees better, not wanting to risk the kind of attention that Vincent had received. A culture of respect and dignity was slowly spreading through the area. On a sunny afternoon, exactly 6 months after the incident that had changed everything, Maria was serving lunch when she noticed a familiar scene. A new restaurant down the street was having problems, with shouting coming from inside and an employee in tears outside. Without hesitation, Maria pulled out her phone and dialed Marco Santangelo's number. "Mr. Santangelo," she said when he answered, "I think someone needs help." Marco smiled on the other end of the line. "Where?" As Maria gave him the address, she realized that she had learned something important from her experience. Sometimes the best way to thank someone for helping you is to help someone else when they need it. The cycle of kindness and justice continued, spreading throughout the neighborhood one act of courage at a time. And at Romano's Italian restaurant, every day began with the knowledge that people deserved to be treated with dignity and respect, no matter what job they held or where they came from. Vincent Romano had discovered that being a good boss wasn't just about running a successful business. It was about creating a place where people could work with pride, knowing they were valued and protected. And Maria Santos had learned that sometimes the worst moments in life can become the beginning of something much better, especially when good people refuse to stand by and watch others suffer. The lesson echoed through the neighborhood. Everyone deserves dignity, respect, and protection from those who would abuse their power. And when people with influence choose to stand up for what's right, they can change not just one life, but an entire community.